They need cooler tanks to stop them from burning out. Because when they take out your home, when they take out you, like they did in Paradise, because Paradise was an EMP test, it was either accidental or it was actually a testing ground. It was a testing ground to see how quickly, how fast it could take EMP and how they could take those buildings out and incinerate. I don't know, the reports anything on 20,000 or 100,000 people have just been cremated. There's nothing left of them.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Radio 5G. This is Michael Henry Dunn with my co-host, Nancy L. Hopkins. And Radio 5G is a joint production of Cosmic Reality Radio and the Sacred Academy of Geoenergetics, acronym SAGE, here in Crestone, Colorado. And we are very glad to have back with us today our good friend Mark Steele from the UK, who is going to share with us today a lot of developments that are both encouraging and really hard to hear about at the same time, because this is a pretty serious fight we've got on our hands.
There's a mass awakening to this 5G. They have absolutely overstepped the mark. I'm getting contact from the US, Australia, all over the continent. People are starting to wake up to this, and it's becoming very, very busy, where I'm spending lots of time talking to people and talking to activists from around the country, but there's lots. We actually in the UK now have got hundreds of groups setting up in towns, villages, cities, right across the country. In fact, the mainstream media, believe it or not, they are starting to cover this, not in exactly the outrageous technology that it is, but they're still starting to cover it as a health risk, instead of, you know, all of the mainstream media were covering it as a security risk. We're starting to see, it was in the Bristol Live News, it was in the Leeds Live News. These are online groups, media groups, where they're talking about the health effects, the detrimental health effects, and that there's no research to show that this stuff's safe. Well, there's never going to be any data to show that 5G is safe, because 5G was developed as a weapon system. Anybody that thinks it's going to be safe, or there's any test that would ever even believe it to be safe, have got something either wrong with them if they know the technology, or they just deceive us and, not being genuine about, basically trying to deflect people from the reality of what 5G is, or they just don't know. So anybody that knows anything about 5G knows that it's very, very dangerous. It has to be. It was developed by the world's military as a weapon. Killed quite a lot of people. In fact, I know a couple of US ambassadors in the Moscow embassy weren't very well, and they died. Developed themselves leukemia from a pulse frequency from a 2.5 gigahertz weapon system. That's the same weapon system, by the way, that you've got in your home. That's the same Wi-Fi that your technology companies can come into your home and change the parameters of the Wi-Fi in your home and weaponize it on top of you.
Yes. At that time, remember, we're talking about the 70s. Okay. See, the thing of it is, because I didn't know about I thought, okay, they've just started this up, because the reason that I even have any comprehension of it, I was in electronic warfare, and I knew what we could do. Okay, so I'm assuming, okay, I'm seeing all this microwave radiation. I'm going, I bet they've done exactly what we do, which was highly, highly classified. I mean, this went beyond top secret, because there is so much collusion throughout the system. You know, for some people, the Soviets/Russians are your ultimate enemy. For other people, it's like, let's tell them they're the enemy and keep them going. You know? So,
right, because we need the game to run the military-industrial complex profits.
Right, because when they went back, and I specifically told them, tell NSA to look for microwave. Okay, so that when the NSA went in, they knew exactly the frequencies they had to look for. And they found it.
Well, as long as we're talking about this, you know, about the military applications, the surveillance applications of millimeter microwave technology and 5G, you know, there are, of course, now in the public domain, patents that were applied for decades ago around this kind of technology, which was specifically for thought control, mind control, to influence brain waves. To what extent, and I know there's stuff Mark needs to share with us about what's going on in the UK. I don't want to delay that, but as long as we're on this topic, is there, are there traceable direct effects of what is being put in place now with the 5G rollout that we can legitimately raise the concern of not just a surveillance system, not just a weaponized system, which we know it can burn and kill, but also a brain control, thought influencing system. Do we have solid information to share on that? I've seen bits and pieces here and there about patents that exist. Is there something we can bring out and share right now with it's other than just speculation on 5G in that regard?
Well, maybe Mark knows more about specifics, but I can tell you they're doing it simply because if the science has been there for so long. You hear about the science and you don't see it applied, and you have to be watching for this. I mean, one of the telltale signs that I would watch for as an intelligence officer spying on the Soviet Union, was to go back and look at technical scientific magazines and discussions of what theoretically they thought they could do, and then to watch and see when this drops off. Because what would happen is that scientists get together and they go, oh wow, if you use this microwave thing, you can control people's minds. So they all start discussing it. They do a little science on it, and then all of a sudden it goes dead silent. As soon as you see dead silent, you know that the state of the Soviet Union was taking over the information. All right, and so now you go, okay, they're trying to make this real. And so I think the same thing can be said. We know there's all these patents and everything, but boom, all of a sudden it goes, semi-silent, and then it comes back up because people find the patents. But I guarantee you, this is part and parcel of what they're attempting to do, is to control, not necessarily come out and kill initially, but to control.
On a scientific level, where you have all these CIA bureaucrats in a room, and this is a very, dry, dull sort of meeting, and this one fellow is presenting some findings regarding either a chemical element that could be put into an aerosol spray that could conceivably be sprayed over a population, and that they had found that this element or combination of chemicals could actually have a genetic effect. They were proposing to possibly spray this over the Middle East because they found a way to access the genetic code that actually hardwires the human being to seek higher reality, to seek meaning, transcendence, basically to seek God. And they said, hey, we found a way to actually switch that off. Wouldn't it be great if we could turn all these Muslim fundamentalists who are all, crazy about God, we could just switch that off and sort of dumb down their impulse to seek the divine? Well, they're probably not going to confine that to just the Middle East and Muslims, though of course Muslims are also, a very large population in Indonesia and India, etc. But do you think that they would confine that technology and say, well, let's keep our own population, safely away from the God thing as well, because in the long run, without actually naming it as such, they could say that's really not in line with our agenda and our design for Americans.
That particular subject, yeah, it's a fake narrative. I can pretty dispel the narrative. What actually happened? You can't sell to the security service, any military organisation, that you're going to wipe out all of that population. So you've got to give them something to go off. You've got to be able to tell them that this is actually a control. Let's control the masses. Let's spy on them. Let's control them, because that's what you see on the tin. I know this technology really well, and that's what it's able to do. It's battlefield interrogation, and the reason why the telecoms companies are currently using sub-gigahertz is it's an urban environment, long-range radar piece of equipment. So, but here's the rub. Here's the bit where it gets really interesting. The mainstream narrative state that you've got to have these transmitters every few houses because higher frequency, that's what they're telling us. It's higher frequency, so they've got to be closer. So we need lots, billions more of them, like every couple of homes. We need them every couple of homes because it doesn't travel very well. It is a crock. It's a fabrication. Reason for that, it's a kill grid. It's a weapon. And it's here to mass kill the population of the USA, the West. If you look at the capacity of the equipment, I have 31,875 streetlights in a small, stinky little town called Gateshead. That's obviously run by a load of Luciferian devil worshippers. Now, I say that because obviously there is, they've got history here, a bit of Luciferian worship, etc. And obviously, if you want to control groups, those circles can be very, very interesting. A lot of it in the military here, in this military intelligence, a lot of spirituality, basically on the devil's side, because some of the things these people have to do, you've really got to be a devil. You've got to be a monster to be able to, the sexual perversions against children and all about the trafficking and stuff like that. And they obviously have to acquiesce to that because with the intelligence equipment we've got globally, it's very easy to track these child traffickers. But obviously somebody just doesn't want to because there's another agenda. But the 31,875 streetlight fitments, each one, a normal, let's say if I was to buy off the shelf a board that was to switch a light on and off, you probably need something in a region 3.5 electron volts, 12 volts, a nice cheap board, something you buy for about 50 pence. You buy them off the shelf in China, go to Shenzhen, you get somebody build one for you. What I wouldn't do is build a board with a 450 volt capacitor attached to it. So we've got 31,875 boards with a high gain dielectric lens with a 450 volt capacity. There's an EMP, it's electromagnetic pulse weapon. It's just one of its weaponized parts because obviously it can shoot you as well. It can target it quite and shoot. It's quite a bit of sophisticated equipment. What it's not capable of doing is switching the lights on and off. That's why the lights are on all over. So the agenda, see, how do you sell to your local intelligence agents the fact that you're going to murder everybody? Well, they wouldn't go for that, would they? It's very unpalatable. You'd have to get a pretty spooky type of guy to want to go for that. Maybe he's only a devil worshipper. But the capacity of the equipment here to kill, it is not here to spy. That is a myth. The control grid is not true. I'm looking at the technology. I'm looking at the capacity. The MIMO tanks have got cooler tanks. They're going to pour that much energy into them. They need cooler tanks to stop them from burning out. Because when they take out your home, when they take out you, like they did in Paradise, because Paradise was an EMP test, it was either accidental or it was actually a testing ground. It was a testing ground to see how quickly, how fast it could take EMP and how they could take those buildings out and incinerate. I don't know, the reports anything on 20,000 or 100,000 people have just been cremated. There's nothing left of them. So
Mark, can we just slow down here for 1 second? Because I really would like you to explain, just sort of like think about Paradise and tell the people step by step what happened there. Can you do that? Because I think if they can understand what already happened, let's use it as an example of what can happen.
Right, well, Paradise was one of two things. It was either an accidental EMP or it was a deliberate EMP. I'm not really sure because I didn't pull the trigger. Now, what I mean by that, if where energy companies coming in up to people's properties and fitting smart meters, all of these smart meters have an overcapacity potential. They have massive potential to pour significant amounts of microwave radiation into your home. It's what's called overburden. So that by the time I fill your home with your smart TV, your deck phone, your Wi-Fi, and let's say I just come in remotely, all of these devices can be activated remotely. They can come in, they can switch them on. You switch them off, I can switch them back on remotely. So I can come into your home and I can switch all them on, I can turn them all up, all at the same time. And then, if I have an overcharge, an overburden, or I want to set off an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, then I'll just incinerate you and your home. So, and how that happens, you've built your home up into this microwave pulsing primed building where all the hydrocarbon, your plasterboard, your timber, you're basically 99% water. So I'm basically just, charging you up. And then when you're pulling over an EMP, you just vaporize. And that's the images. If you look at the images in Paradise.
1 second. I want that to be very clearly understood. He said the word, you will be vaporized. That means you're going to go poof, disappear. Now, let me just stop you here so that people can understand why. Again, I'm going back into history. I was explained to me a system back in 1976 that it was an electromagnetic pulse, and if it was completely in sync with your body, what would happen was it would disrupt, jam your system to a degree that the molecular cohesion of your body would be lost, and you would go into a white light flame. Boom, gone. And it happened. They actually activated. That's how I know that it happened. So if it's off, if it's not completely focused, well, then you get, deranged in your mind, or maybe you'll have a heart attack or something. But by this time, they know exactly the frequency at which the average human body will lose molecular cohesion. So they don't even have to worry about killing you and then having bodies. They just get rid of your body and you in one quick pulse.
Right. And if I could just point out here, when we're talking about, first of all, Paradise, California, and the fires there, and how an EMP would be used in this way. In case some of our listeners aren't aware, the nature of the fires in Paradise, California, there were many firemen who said, we have never seen fire behave in this way. There are many instances in which a building not near the trees that were on fire would just suddenly implode in flames. Multiple occasions. And yes, there are certain conditions under which, at a certain level of heat, a building will suddenly catch fire so quickly that it looks like that. We're talking veteran firefighters saying they have never seen anything like this, and that this appeared to be a targeted energy weapons system that was being tested in Paradise. And, we happen to know of someone who has done a lot of research on the deep state, on the cabal, etc., who had a huge amount of research, hard copy research in his home, lived in Paradise, and poof, gone. It was all vaporized. But I just want to touch briefly on the whole EMP thing, because it's my understanding, people listening to us describe this, listening to the white flash of a dechemisalization, of the vanishing of a human being in a moment. They're like, well, okay, maybe they can do this, but, how would you possibly get away with this? I mean, just, having people vaporize or disappear, it would be so obvious. People would be so outraged, they could never get away with this. Well, the whole concept of an EMP and how it would be used, and the repeated attempts to create a state of martial law through a false flag in this country, and other countries have used it historically as well. Of course, we know that Nazi Germany, Kristallnacht, and other historical incidents where deliberate fires and bombs were set to blame on the Jews to trigger the Holocaust. The same thing here, where the White House comes out, as it did recently, with the whole set of protocols about how the U.S. would survive an EMP. How would we prepare for an EMP, a weaponized electromagnetic pulse, presumably set off by a low-level in the atmosphere nuclear explosion or an EMP device that would knock out the satellite system, would knock out, that it would be very plausible to, once you have done that, suddenly the grids go down, the government declares this was an EMP by a hostile power, be it China or Russia, martial law is declared. At that point, they can take out whoever they want. The checks and balances of the Constitution are gone. They're mostly gone already, but even the observation of them is gone. The ability to communicate with each other and say, holy crap, they just vaporized my aunt sitting in her, in her rocking chair. That's all gone. And it's at that point, I think, if you're looking at a major depopulation agenda where the puppeteers behind the puppeteers, maybe even the puppeteers behind the puppeteers behind the puppeteers, who want to see a global war would be using this. So I just wanted to frame that story for our listeners. Please continue, Mark, with your description of how this rolled out, both as a weapon and an EMP or thought control device.
Let me just go back here for a second to where he was, because what he's saying is that when you put these 5G devices into your home, you are now connected to the 5G system, and that 5G system is now bombarding you with microwave energy that is actually creating a very unstable situation within your own physical body, never mind the structure of your own home. And so I think I'm correct on that, Mark. And so that's where you were explaining that, it's like they set the bomb and then the trigger for the explosion is the smart meter. Is that correct?
Well, either it can be smart meters, it can be 5G. The 5G, what we've got to the mini cells, and obviously in these micro cells, in the streetlights, the micro cells in the streetlights have got massive overcapacity. I mean, I showed it to a judge in the case when I was in the court, when I was actually in the witness stand, and the judge, I said to him, Your Honour, I said, that there is a control management system for a light. It operates on 12 volts. I said, in this piece of equipment, this bit of hardware, which looks pretty chunky, pretty heavy duty stuff, I said, this is the equipment that's fitted in the streetlights in Gateshead. And I says, one is actually what's called a DEW, direct energy weapon, because obviously I've got the target acquiring antenna. This one's actually got a target acquiring antenna piece of equipment attached to it. So I was explaining that to him. I could see his jaw spot on. It's the first time, he's probably heard that the local authority have rolled out a weapon system on top of the citizenry. And, these judges, it's. I think I've had about 5 judges up there now, and they've all read my skeleton argument, all know what's going on, which is bizarre to say the least. But that's acquiescing in a human rights crime, because that's what 5G most certainly is. I mean, we had some terrible news last night. A young boy, I knew his mother contacted me about a year ago. Through a friend. A friend asked me about this 5G and whether it would cause strange cancers. And I said, well, it's experimental. It's an 868. We're not really sure. And obviously the phased array radar, so the scanning part of it. I said, we're not really sure what type of cancer, but yeah, I can guarantee we'll have some strange ones. And we'll definitely have quite a lot of brain cancers, strange brain cancers. Not be the normal, the glioblastoma from mobile phones. These will be a lot more strange, in which that's what we're starting to see, because we've had a couple locally who've had brain cancer. I just had a report yesterday of a young girl who've had brain cancer. But going back to this young boy had developed a very interesting cancer, heart cancer. So his mother sent me all the details of it. And I'm not going to mention who they are, what really happened in relation to that, but I checked up the cancer, and lo and behold, the cancer was extremely rare and has only ever been attributed to radar operators. Very, very rare. So the fact that a 5-year-old, well, obviously he was 4-year-old at the time, a 5-year-old child would develop this type of illness is unbelievable and incontrovertible that it is the streetlight phased array, illegal, unlawful, secret rollout of 5G in the gated area. That is most certainly the cause. And that poor little lad died yesterday.
My condolences to you, Mark, because I know that your heart must have been involved in the family. What he's saying here to you, it rings very true with me, because when I realized the dangers of all this stuff, it was I eventually, I was out of the military. Well, I was still in the military, but in the reserves. And my brother, who was in the Navy, he came down to Florida because he had to do some Navy work off the coast, and so I got him to tell me what he was doing, and I didn't realize that he was working with radars. And I said, "Whoa!" I said, "How long have you been working?" He says, "Well, that's what my job is. I work with radars." And I tried to explain to him the problem with radars is it's the same thing that's in 5G. It's exactly the same thing.
It is 5G.
Okay, so because I already knew that in secret information, highly classified, that they were seeing really weird cancers in radar operators and radar technicians, particularly. But this was the military; they kept that all silent. Another thing that they kept silent, Mark, when Vietnam happened and they came out with the first night goggles, okay? What happened was it was burning the retinas. It was causing damage in the eyes. And I was the safety officer of the company, and I was called to this meeting, a highly secret meeting, and they're telling us this. And I said, well, how do we tell the troops this? How do we tell the people that have been exposed to this that they're gonna have blindness in a few years? And they said, oh no, you can't tell anybody. This is secret. Can you imagine?
Well, what I really can't imagine, I mean, the same technology was used in the Google Glass. What I cannot understand is how this killer technology, I mean, if I was to build, and I've been involved in a number of weapon sight systems, we use the 560 nanometers. And the reason why we use that, not that it's 100% safe, it's just far less biologically active than either full spectrum or the blue spectrum light. So obviously you use the green spectrum. That's why weapon sight systems are mainly green, because they're less damaging to the retina. Full spectrum light's pretty damaging. I mean, we did some research where where retinal cells in vitro, where they were tested against these blue LED emitters, we had less than 20% survivability. So you can imagine, and I think full spectrum was something like 40% survivability, where green spectrum, the 560 nanometers, was near fine. Slight bit of damage. But you get damage in the retina with any optical radiation, because obviously optical radiation is a well-known classified carcinogen and a hazard. So it's so the evidence was definitely there, but it's interesting what you're saying. So how do we get to the point where we've got gaming headsets that large technology companies are rolling out en masse across the whole population, offering for children to test in schools, using pulse modulated full spectrum microwave, terahertz range pulse modulated light, which is, makes microwaves look like something that's not that dangerous, believe it or not, especially when you focus them through a magnifying glass onto a child's retina. It's pretty bizarre. It's probably the reason why they brought 5G out, to kill everybody before their children die of eye cancer. But anyway, that's another story. So we've got children being harmed. We've got children getting brain cancer. We've got children dying. All on the back of someone's idea that they think it's a good idea to spy on us.
Mark, let me ask you about the brain cancer in the child, which was a rare form of cancer previously associated with radar operators, right?
Now that was a hard
Yeah. That, I mean, how can we share this on a solid basis with like epidemiological evidence of proximity to either one of the LED street lamps or a small cell tower in Gateshead? How can we establish, an evidentiary connection that can't be dismissed as like, oh yeah, those people on, they're 5G activists making wacky, connections and theories. Because obviously this, the link to a very rare form of cancer associated with radar operators, that's big, in a community in which 5G has just been rolled out. That, can we, because I'd love to go, more public with this, and we always need to be careful. Often, we are lured out to be exposed, with going out there with slightly inaccurate information. They nail you. They destroy your credibility. They say, oh, look at what these wild claims they're making, and there's no basis because of this and that. I'd love to be able to, if this is, obviously this sounds quite real and substantial, and I'd love to be able to just go out there with it with high confidence, with some evidence that would hold up in court or hold up with epidemiological studies. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, before we do that, let's just get a time frame. I asked you earlier before we got on the show, when did they put the lights in Gateshead?
The first knowledge I had of them, they started the rollout sometime in 2013, 2012, 2013. But what they did, they fitted the street light, and it was to the main highways. Now, obviously, the main highways are a lot higher up, so the directional antennas would scan over the top of most homes. Yeah, you'd have to be at a pretty long distance away, maybe 15 or 20 mile away for that ray to come to basically hit a home, obviously with a slight curvature. So the first rollout was the main highways. They were very, very high up, the lamps, well above the height of a home. And then when I believe that was either 2013, 2014, they started putting the lights in the streets. Well, there was a lot lower down. In fact, the directional that directly opposite people's bedroom windows. It wasn't until 2016, September 2016, when they rocked up outside of my home. And obviously, I already knew that the LED streetlights weren't exactly safe, but I've got blackout blinds. Nobody's been warned about that either. And they rocked up with these LED streetlights that looked a bit unsafe. And then I had neighbours knocking on doors telling us about nosebleeds. So that's basically the time frame. So 2016 was, my factual evidence when I knew that they'd roll this stuff out. It took me till it was about mid-2017 when I had one of these transmitters thrown at me by one of their lighting guys. What actually happened, I was coming down the street and I said to the chap, "What are you doing up there?" Because obviously a lot of them being destroyed where I lived. I don't know why. Anyway, come back this night in the afternoon and there was a lighting guy and he was fixing the light, and I explained to him, I said, "Look, that will kill a baby. They are murdering babies. That transmitter is illegal." Anyway, he said something along the lines of, "I've been fitting them for 10 years. You don't know what you're talking about." Well, I then knew he was a liar because he hadn't been fitting them for 10 years. That wasn't true. And obviously, I'm not really keen on people that tell lies. So I had a bit shouted at him. Anyway, he ended up throwing this thing at me. And that's when I really had a good look at it and realised, I already had the technical data from the manufacturer, so I had a rough idea. But in the technical manufacturer, they didn't talk about the antenna design, the high gain antenna design. In fact, the whole technical sort of document that come with the product was false. It was a falsification of what was actually in the light system. Because obviously what was actually in the light system was a target acquiring weapon system. And I then took that, couldn't believe my eyes. I really just couldn't believe what I was looking at.
Okay, now let's just make sure that everybody understands what you were looking at. You had already gotten the manufacturer's specs for this device, and then this guy, sent by God, threw you the device. And you get the device and you compare it to the spec sheet, and you realize that this spec sheet is a bunch of crap and that this is actually a weapon system. It has nothing to do with telecommunications, correct?
Absolutely. They had actually applied for Part 15 FCC approval for the antenna, and obviously this one was a high gain. Well, that would normally apply to a dipole antenna, and it most certainly wouldn't apply to a 25 milliwatt transmitter. And obviously we were measuring radiation in people's bedrooms. Part 15 FCC, I think it's about 50 meters. It can be no more than 5 milliwatt. We were millivolts, sorry. We were actually measuring in people's bedrooms 800, 4,000 millivolts. And a Part 15 FCC at 30 meters should be no more than 5. Otherwise it fails. So, but that was just it was just confirmation of the antenna design and how this antenna can focus a signal. And obviously that's what it was doing. It was sweeping the area with a scanner. It was scanning the area with this and the reason for the sub-gigahertz. And that's why people have to understand, do not do your own research. Do not believe the mainstream narrative. The higher frequencies, the 30 gigahertz, 60 gigahertz, I'm telling you now, doesn't travel in air. I can gas you with it. I can make a gas chamber with it and gas you with it, but it's not going to travel in air. So that's the equipment they're rolling out in America. They're currently putting out these reactors to gas people at 60 gigahertz because it doesn't serve any other purpose. You can't get a telecommunications signal up to 60 gigahertz. I mean, how do you do that? It's just, I mean, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy what we're talking about.
Let me ask you something. Yeah, Mark, excuse me for interrupting. You brought up a point earlier that I'd like to go into a little bit. You were talking about how the mainstream narrative in the media is that there needs to be, a small cell tower every couple of blocks. Yeah. Because millimeter microwave doesn't, it's a short wave. It's not like you can do it from one hilltop to another, 10 miles away. But you were saying that possibly in concert with the low-level satellite network being rolled out, 20,000 low-level satellites across the planet, or I wasn't quite sure, but it seemed as if you were saying that for 5G to go online with the potentially deadly effect, surveillance effect, that brain effect that we're talking about, it doesn't necessarily need to be that close. That we've got all of us looking for small cell towers going up every couple of blocks. This has been very much part of the narrative that I've been sharing with people because I thought that was a basic aspect of the technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
And are you saying now that it potentially is not, and that they could do it?
Not. Yeah, it's definitely not. The sub-gigahertz range, these small micro cells are operating in the sub-gigahertz range. And the reason why they're doing that is because it's urban environment radar, sub-gigahertz. Long-range radar operates mainly in the sub-gigahertz range. I mean, the weapon systems, the sweet spot for weapon systems is about 10 megahertz up to about 10 gigahertz. That's your real sweet spot. You get over there, you get a bit too high, then it's not going to be much good to you. But the real sweet spot, you see, for your target acquiring, if I want to look into the urban environment, it doesn't have to be sub-gigahertz. But once you get beyond the sub-gigahertz range, you start to get attenuation in there. You start to get it blocked by concrete and brickwork. Well, if I want to look into your home, if I want to see what's under your bed, if I want to see you having relationships in your home and spy on you, I need sub-gigahertz signal. And these micro cells are operating on the sub-gig, and they're turning around saying they need lots of them. They need every couple of houses because they don't travel well in air. Well, I'm going to tell you, they travel pretty well in air. It's long-range radar. I mean, these signals have traveled 3,000 miles these travel within the built-up urban environment, 15 to 20 to 30 mile. And the built-up, I'm talking about going through lots of reinforced concrete here, by the way, in a cityscape. So let's say if I've got 20 or 30,000 of these, I can blanket coverage, 3D map a whole cityscape with a class 1 cancer causing radiation. But that's just so I can spy on you. That's not what this is for.
Okay, Mark, just let me stop here for a second because I want to give people a visual picture of what you're talking about. Most people now are familiar with the LiDAR concept, that you've got a laser in a plane flying over dense jungle that can see through the jungle to see what's on the ground.
Yeah.
All right, that's the same kind of technology, only it's being directed so that it can see through concrete. Not just trees and foliage, but concrete and wood and everything else that might protect you from being... They can watch you walking around your house.
Absolutely. Do you want a picture? I've got a picture.
Yes, I know, and I realized that it's easier to explain what they might have seen. And it's the LiDAR they've seen, Yeah,
I've got the images. But this shows you the deception, the deceit, the dishonesty of these organizations, because you see that's the mainstream narrative, Vives. We need lots of them because they're doing travel very well. It is absolute garbage. They travel with these in the urban environment, these sub-gigahertz signals. So you've got to ask yourself the question, why do they want one every couple of houses? The reason why is because it's an EMP. If you take the equipment to bits and have a look at the capacity of it, you'll see it's got this massive potential for an electromagnetic pulse. Now, obviously, if I then fill your home with all of the other equipment, your smart meter, the one I can turn up at ease, your smart fridge, I can come in the middle of the night and turn that up, and I can also come in and I can turn your Wi-Fi up. And not only that, I can change the pulse modulation. So I can change the pulse modulation and the frequencies that you were talking about before, where I can start to disassociate the molecular bonds, and then you fire the overburden, boom, you no need to bury anybody. I mean, what a fantastic weapon. This is the greatest weapon of all time, right? I'll tell you why. You're paying for it. So you pay for your own death, and they don't even have to come and dig a hole to bury you.
Let me ask you something. Excuse me, Mark. Let me ask you something. When you're talking sub-gigahertz range, what exactly does that mean in terms of numbers? Like 2.5 gigahertz is what?
Well, anything under a gigahertz, right, is sub-gigahertz. And if you look at the industry standard, what actually happened at first, Michael, I was telling people that 5G was sub-gig, and everybody said, doesn't know what he's talking about, he's a lunatic, conspiracy theorist, he's making it up. We now know that the industry have admitted that 5G is sub-gigahertz. 700 megahertz to 900 megahertz is their sweet spot. So that's the industry, that's what they're saying. I think the US, it's about 700, it's 800 in the UK, and I think they've got the 900 spectrum in Europe. Quite interesting. That could be another very interesting aspect, the fact that they've actually changed the part of the spectrum at different parts of the world.
Oh, well, let me share with you a piece of news that came out yesterday, and this is regarding the FCC. I shared this with you, Nancy. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it yet. This is from an industry magazine called Engadget. So this isn't an activist piece of news. This isn't somebody trying to alert everybody to how dangerous 5G is. This is a telecommunications industry publication just keeping us all up to date on the wonderful rollout of the 5G system. Headline on this article is FCC Chairman wants to open mid-band airwaves for 5G. They'll vote on this in July. Let me just read a little bit of this to you. This may be relevant, it may not, but it sounds like it probably could be. Here's the article. U.S. carriers have mostly rolled out 5G on high frequencies, with upcoming auctions aiming even higher. Unfortunately, these choices create problems. The implementations typically don't work well indoors, and they risk interfering with weather forecasts and other tasks that might depend on high bands. So the FCC might provide some much-needed breathing room in lower spectrum slices. However, the FCC chairman, Ajit Pai, has circulated an order that, if approved, would open 2.5 gigahertz airwaves for 5G. This spectrum was set aside in the 1960s with services like educational TV in mind, but a large part of it has gone unused for decades, according to the FCC chairman. This would make use of mid-band wireless and would theoretically allow both incumbents and relative newcomers to claim frequencies they didn't have before. So they're looking to finalize the details of a December auction of 37 gigahertz, 39 gigahertz, and 47 gigahertz bands as part of their broader 5G FAST plan that would aim to speed up deployment of the wireless data. Is this relevant, Mark?
Well, it's definitely relevant, but I mean, you've got to remember these are masters of deception. I mean, you only have to look at Telestra, Telenza, go and have a look at their website and what it tells you. The bit of equipment that fit on the top of the street light is designed to look like a light sensor. Now ask yourself this question. If 5G is safe, why do the manufacturers want to make the bits to look like something else? Why do the manufacturers want to go to all the trouble to design equipment that looks like something that it isn't? It's a bit like the connectors, electronic connectors. They're like a lobe thing. There's a company in South America. They make 5G antennas to sit inside them to make them look like they're just a normal telecoms potted connector. And you can hang them on the side of telegraph poles and nobody be none the wiser. So why are companies across the world, telecoms companies, going to all the trouble of designing that equipment to look like something? Either to be proud of 5G or they're not proud of it? Or does it actually mean there's something a lot more sinister in relation to the rollout? Well, what I'm going to tell people, 5G is a weapon. In all of its technical parameters, I'll explain them to people today. 5G is a widening out of spectrum. In the lower part of the spectrum, as well as the higher part of the spectrum, both are just as dangerous. The higher frequencies don't penetrate walls as well. The sub-gigs do. So if I've actually got a 30 gigahertz emitter, right, and I've also got a sub-gigahertz frequency emitter, I can penetrate your home with ease because I've already penetrated the wall with a sub-gig. Do you know what I mean? I've already resonated the frequency in your concrete wall with a sub-gigahertz frequency, so I can break through. Now,
okay. I gotta stop you here. So you're saying that the sub-gigahertz, meaning that if you see 1 gigahertz, that's gigahertz above. Sub is anything below 1 gigahertz. Gigahertz. When you put a 1 gigahertz on a concrete wall, that wall begins to disintegrate because it's losing its molecular cohesion, correct?
Yes, correct.
So this is absolutely, without any equivocation, a definition of a direct energy weapon. This is exactly what brought down the Twin Towers on 9/11.
Of course it is.
My God, I didn't know what frequency, Mark. I'm going, how the hell did they do that? I knew what they had done, but it was like, what frequency? It's the sub-gigahertz frequencies, ladies and gentlemen. The smaller you get, the more you're resonating with the molecular of concrete. Never mind what it's doing to your body, but and that's why you're saying that the integrity of the nuclear power plants is failing because of the sub-gigahertz destroying the concrete walls and foundation that are protecting the reactors.
Let us explain what 5G is first, Michael. Right, for everybody out there. 5G's first technical parameter means more. Doesn't matter what it is. A lot more of it is 5G. And the reason that's why it's a weapon, because obviously we already know that the small amount that we've had with the 4G rollout has killed quite a lot of people sick. So 5G is billions more antennas, billions more close proximity antennas. Doesn't matter what they operate. I had an argument with a guy down in London. They're doing this telecare. All the equipment, all the hardware is 2G, 3G. They're 2G, 3G boards. The whole equipment platform is all in that spectrum. Yeah, it's all older equipment. Hasn't got the high gain dielectric lens antennas, which is specific to 5G, by the way. Anyway, the guy's telling me it's not 5G. I said, listen, it's 5G. They're putting it on the people's chimney breasts and putting it in their roofs for a telecare. It's all part of the 5G weapon, because the 5G is all about filling the environment with as much microwave radiation as possible. Because like I said, 5G's got nothing to do with telecommunications. 5G is a weapon. So the more I put into an environment, no matter what it is, that's why, and this isn't me saying this, I mean, Ofcom and the European Union have identified 5G as 1G, 2G, 3G, and 4G, as long as it hits the main technical parameter, which is densification. Weapon. The more you get, the more you die. All right? But this is where it's really interesting, because if you look at the overcapacity of the equipment that are fitting to the street lighting and the smart meter grid and the smart grid, the capacity of the equipment to be used as a weapon, it's all there. One of the things that's pretty interesting, I think, what happened in Paradise, obviously, whether it was a test or it was accidental, the equipment, there was a burnout at the power stations, at the transformers. It was the same when they tested it in South Korea. They had a burnout at the transformers. They had a burnout in the electrical equipment, because this stuff will burn out your normal infrastructure. And this is the reason for electric cars. Because electric cars don't make any economic sense. Don't make any sense at all in any way, shape or form. In fact, pretty toxic to the environment, very toxic to humans who drive them if you drive them for any more than 30 minutes. In fact, I wouldn't let your driver want at all, because the magnetic flux in the cabin's pretty high. And if you're travelling at speed and also you're changing the speed, so you've got that oscillation of speed, that's not very good for the body at all. So bad heads, sore eyes, and that'll kill you. That'll make sure you buy yourself an electric car. That'll make sure you don't get your pension.
Mark, you're on cars now. We need to get back to Paradise and what you were talking about, the substation.
Well, see where the Paradise attack. Now, it may have been an accident. It may not have been an accident, but whatever it was an EMP. And you can tell that by the disappearance of the people. Obviously, there's reports of lots and lots of people where they just disappeared. And the buildings, the state of the buildings, how the buildings were basically burned to the ground very, very quickly. Ferocious fires. That's always a thing to look out for, because obviously if you get an ignition and the fire's ferocious, Grenfell Tower was a very good ferocious fire. And obviously there was lots of question marks about the lack of bodies, which tells you that it was potentially an EMP, could have been a test. Quite interestingly enough, Grenfell Tower just had a new type of smart meter fitted. The previous smart meter didn't work very well and had been setting fire to all of the appliances in the place. That was something that kept out of the mainstream media. In fact, it was so bad, the council had actually had to pay the residents an ex gratia payment. I think they got £170 or £270 each, because their equipment in their homes was bursting into flames. Pretty interesting bit of information, and something that was totally kept out of the media, something that was well documented, and still, for some inexplicable reason, never got aired again when the fire actually took hold. Then obviously we've seen the catastrophe that happened. There's recently, just a couple of weeks ago, we've had another fire in London. And when I looked at the pictures are really telling, because you can see the buildings gassing off. So the flames are actually on the outside of the building, and the building's not on fire. The building itself isn't on fire, but the building's gassing off. So obviously you get the right oxygen mix with whatever hydrocarbon gas is being broken down and coming off the building, and then you see this wall of fire, this absolute wall of fire, but you can see the fabric of the building. So it's not where, if you watch a normal fire, you see the fire bursting up through the windows and going up the wall, and basically it's at the top of the ceiling, and it comes up through the window and then goes up the wall. And that's why we're seeing these fires that firemen have never seen before. They're inexplicable.
Mark, let me ask you, Mark. Exactly the point you're making. They're not rolling out 5G and turning off 3G and 4G. It's a layer cake of more toxic Wi-Fi. It is a densification. It is cumulative. And by the way, 5G is not going to improve your cell phone reception. You get a lot of people going, oh, yeah, bring it on. I can barely, hear, in my area, and the reception's so bad on my cell phone. It's data carrying. It's not about getting better, cell phone voice reception, right? But this issue of densification being the key factor whereby we can know, that 5G is being rolled out. Is the rollout of the satellite network going to effectively blanket all of us in 5G with or without small cell towers every few hundred yards? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Well, the issue that you have, the satellites in air are basically a mirror system. You do get some satellites that have got quite a bit of energy, but nowhere near powered up enough to be able to be dangerous to people on the ground. What you do, you use them as you've got a ground-based weapon. If you're going to use them as a weapon, you get a ground-based weapon. It's basically just a mirror in the sky, and you can then it's how they develop them for tracking in ICBMs. That's the whole point of satellites. It's so you can actually take a weapon system over somebody else's territory and drop it on them, because obviously they're not going to let you put a ground radar to track anything in. So you've got to put it in the air. So that was the whole point of satellites. And these satellites, obviously, in the sub-gigahertz range, you've got quite a bit of distance there. So the weapon can be pretty potent in that, because it doesn't attenuate in air very well. And so you've got quite a heavy punch. So these ground arrays, these massive ground arrays have the potential to be used as over-the-horizon weapon systems, where they're reflected off these satellites in the sky, take anybody out anywhere in the world, take a building out, take a military base out, take something out. So nobody's safe. Everybody's got to understand 5G is an existential threat to everything.
Okay, wait, let me just stop you here for a second again. I'm so sorry, but the details, I need the details. All right, so what we're saying here now is that, considering it a weapon system, that the satellites are not active agents. They are simply reflectors, correct?
Well, I haven't, to be honest, I haven't, Nancy, I haven't seen them. I'd have to see the design to see what the potential of them is. But okay. Most satellites that are actually in the sky are basically a reflector from a ground-based system.
Well, I know enough to say to myself, the satellite system isn't fitting the mold. It's not complying with what I think should be happening with the satellite system, because they're so small, and, if you're just using it as a relay point, all it is a relay point. And what you're saying is that it is not, as well as being something that can control your local population, you can actually use the satellite systems because there's 20,000 of them. See, when you want to target something, you need multiple points of reference to get an exact targeting done. So you need a lot of these satellites. This is what's making sense to me now. It's a targeting system. So you have the ground station that is now, and yes, sometimes people. There was a court case. And Sprint and somebody else, Sprint and Verizon, sued AT&T because they were talking about their new 5G system, and in fact it was 4G improved. Okay, yes. And so you've got that kind of malarkey confusion happening. But this concept turns it around. Instead of being afraid, Michael, that the satellites, once they become active, that they're 5G potential, because I'm going like, there's no way the millimeter is going to travel from space and with any, I mean, it was just like inconceivable to me.
It just won't travel. It won't travel. You've got to have sub-gigahertz to travel long distance, and that's why I knew. See, when I first came across the 5G in Gateshead, as soon as when I first found out it was sub-gigahertz, I was like scratching my head thinking, well, hang on a minute, what is it? What do they want to cheeky? And I thought the cheeky swines, they're using it to scan, like an urban scanner, like a radar urban scanner. And it wasn't until I got my hands on one that I realised what it really was, which was even more outrageous, the fact that your government thinks it can roll a weapon system out on top of you, and they haven't had the decency to declare war on you. So it's a secret war that they haven't told you. They've took you along to a fight, and they haven't even told you. That's a bit cheeky. I mean, that's a bit of a coward's. That's a coward's way to go on. It's not British at all. I mean, at least we used to go and wave our flags and dress up for a fight. I mean, these lot have come through the back door, and that shows you the type of devilish Luciferian characters we're dealing with. These are devious, but it also shows you they can't face the fight. They can't face the fight. They've got to do it backhand. They've got to do it behind the scenes. It's all secret. Let's all just kill these lot off. Let's get them sick. Let's make them ill. I'll tell you now, they must be absolutely past themselves, because we know. And we are 4 years too early. The bit I wanted to talk about, the cars are part of the weapon system. And the reason for that, they need localized power packs. Because obviously when you fire an EMP, you've got a good chance of taking out the power grid. If you take down the power grid, then obviously you need something to carry on, because what they want to do, it's no good killing 500,000 people and leaving 500,000 left. I mean, people would go absolutely bonkers, and especially in America, because you guys are all, tooled up to the teeth. That wouldn't be very good at all. So if you're going to pull an EMP, you need to kill everybody. Don't leave anybody alive. All right? Doesn't matter. It's probably one of the reasons why Trump's been upset with the Chinese and his 5G, because he's realised exactly what it is. He's been watching some of my videos, I'm sure. Anyway, the reality of it is they've got to kill everything, because you cannot leave. I spoke to a guy the other day who was on about this Agenda 21, and it's all about there's going to be 500 million left. It's all about this depopulation. What an absolute load of crock. Can you imagine? You're the controller. I'm the person who's just wiped out the vast majority of the world's biology and human life. All right? I'm going to leave 500 million people left. What if they turn on us? Now, there's a potential problem. Now what they're starting to talk about is the health problems. And obviously wants to start to understand that this technology is experimental. It has never been tested to be safe. It is a research project in breach of the Nuremberg Code. That's when we'll start to see some real feathers start to fly. So what's happening in the UK is fantastic. But I want to go back to what you said before, Michael. We've got children in schools now, young girls in schools being sterilised by industrial-grade Wi-Fi. Those children will never have babies. Those children will be harmed. That harm will come in the next 10 to 15 years. The gestation from microwave radiation to epidemic to kill could be 15 to 20 years out. We have one of the largest human rights crimes ever been perpetrated on the human race. I believe if there's 500 million of us left by the end of the decade, we'll be lucky. I say that with all confidence in the evidence that I have in relation to the LED streetlights. The blue phosphor-coated LED streetlights are a program called Soft Kill. In Barcelona, there's 20 institutions have done a study in relation to the LED streetlights. They've doubled the breast and the prostate cancer. They've only been in for 3 years. I can tell you that that epidemic is 15 to 20 to 25 years out, as it was with smoking. So those people are dying today only after having 3 years of exposure to that optical radiation, which is absolutely lethal. So I believe there'll be hundreds of millions will die across Europe from that LED streetlight. In cityscapes across the US where they're using the same technology, I can expect mass population collapse. The sterilisation of people where they've been exposed to this Wi-Fi in schools, classrooms. We've already got the evidence of the sperm count collapsing, has done over the last few years. So we'll see population collapse. We will see people being sterilised. This equipment was used in the camps to sterilise people. This technology was taken to the USA under Operation Paperclip. The frequencies that are being emitted from your Wi-Fi cause diabetes. Why do you think they picked 2.5 gigahertz? People need to wake up and make sure that they take action in relation to the crime that's being committed against us. And I'll tell you now, the 500 million that are left will have justice.
Mark, when this young man came down, the little child, the 4-year-old, when he came down with the cancer, did you go and did you take measurements? Did you look to see how far away that antenna was from his bedroom?
I measured. Obviously, I got in touch with the mother. Went down to the house. I measured the radiation. It was a constant 1200 to 1400 millivolts. Now, obviously, that's well within IC and IRP guidelines, but it's in breach of the Europem 216 guidelines. It's in breach of the Council of Europe 1815 resolution, the international courts. It's in breach of the building code regulations and an affront to anybody who thinks that that type of radiation would be safe to a child. It is absolutely deplorable, and that poor boy's dead. He is going to be one of a significant number that will die over the next few years because, like I said, exposure to this type of radiation, the potential epidemic is 15 to 20 years out. We survive this, and I believe population numbers will collapse across the West as this epidemic starts to take hold. Got to remember, we've only been exposed to this radiation for, in most part, 10 years. Now we've got the ubiquitous smart meter rollout, which they started aggressively over 5 years ago. We've got the 5G rollout. So you've got this massive overburden poured out from criminals, from criminal enterprise to harm deliberately with intent to harm the citizen. They are intending to harm us.
The other thing.
The 350, that's what I keep saying. There are 350, the world's leading scientists. Deborah Davis's group, they got signatories. 180 leading scientists wrote for a moratorium on microwave radiation in air. It was ignored. The 350, the 80,000 signatories to the 5G Stop Space Appeal, ignored by criminals in positions of power, public servants who forgot their role, that they serve us and they are not our masters, and they cannot and are not in a position to harm the people.
What I'm seeing happen here is that these local groups are getting together because they start talking to one another. Now, are you seeing the same thing, that it's totally grassroots, that you guys with your organization aren't out there in the streets telling this people to beware, and it's actually that they're becoming knowledgeable enough to organize themselves?
And the truth can sometimes be very, very abrasive and very, very, not very nice and not palatable. However, this is not going to be easy. The people who are behind it are going to try and do everything they can to carry on with their plan. We have to overcome that, and that's going to take every fiber in my body.
They didn't use social media. I mean, they've got it, but they went to the streets. They got in front of the telecommunication stores and gave people information. That's why I'm so firmly convinced that if you just start talking to one another, you're going to find the organization will come together right in your neighborhood, right in your own home, with the people around you. And that's how it's got to work, because just like Mark's saying, we don't have any way of knowing if they're seeing our 5G posts.
Small number that's coming through are enough to give people hope that we smash this evil. But I've also got to go back to, it's very important we know their battle plan. Obviously, you get people who want to do petitions, knock on council doors. People have to do more than that. People have to make lots more people aware about what's really happening, and that's how you tackle it. It's always best to know your adversary's battle plan, and if you've got
right. So we are at 12:03 p.m. here in Crestone, Colorado, in the mystical San Luis Valley, and so we're going to wrap up our program today on Radio 5G. Mark Steele, thank you so much, my friend, for your courage and for your time and sharing with us here today. And thank you all for listening and being with us on Radio 5G. It's 5G-KNOW.com, 5G-know.com. Lots of great information we're sharing with everybody there. So God bless us, everyone. And Nancy, do you want to say a farewell for us all and take us out into the music?
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you so much. Michael, same. And everybody be safe. We'll see you later.